Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Ogg, Harris County DA. I believe this is our first press conference in this room. It was built right before Harvey. It was completed literally the day before Harvey hit, and we never got to use it. All of our equipment was taken out, so we look forward to better lights, better malt stands, better everything in the future, but we're just happy to have everybody here at the Criminal Justice Center. I'm joined today by a number of my colleagues from the Traffic Crime Task Force, and we're here to talk about street takeovers and illegal racing. You'll hear today from Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, Assistant Police Chief with HPD, Wyatt Martin, Special Crimes Bureau Chief Ruben Perez, who will handle the Spanish-speaking part along with Sheriff Gonzalez, and Regional Director Brown from DPS. As you know, in Austin, just weeks ago, there was a massive street takeover, and it clearly endangered not just the lives of the drivers and the spectators, but of the police who responded to the call. It got lawmakers' attention, who recently, in just sessions past, voted to upgrade racing into a criminal offense. And it got the attention, I think, of other illegal street racers and folks who want to take over our streets in our town. And the purpose of this press conference is a warning to those individuals that if you participate in criminal activity with your car that endangers other people's lives and you insist on taking over our streets, we will take over your cars. I think everyone knows that illegal offenses are tracked by police officers, they are investigated by police officers, and charges are filed by them. Our office prosecutes criminally, but we also prosecute civilly when criminal instruments are necessary for criminals to commit the crime. So cars are deadly weapons. We see that evidence, unfortunately, every day in our state. So make no mistake, there are more serious offenses than a traffic ticket for speeding than you're going to get. To that end, almost 1,000 racing cases were filed last year. We currently have, between the reckless driving and the racing, about 850 cases pending. Our asset forfeiture division, represented here today by our prosecutors and their chief, Angela Beavers, have seized more than 200 cars. And those cars are not given back to the offenders. Those cars are, once they've been seized, forfeited civilly in the courts, and they either go to the lien holders, they're forfeited to law enforcement. Sometimes deals are struck with owners of cars, but the idea, as our prosecutors have so adeptly told me, the idea is get the car out of the hands of the criminals. And so with Texas 2K23, a well-known racing event coming up, we know that there will be incidental illegal street racing. We know that some may be planning takeovers, and we want you to know that law enforcement is ready for you. Law enforcement is waiting. And the courts have greater tools than you may know than even jail, because we know that your cars are important to you, for those folks who engage in that out there. And we know that when we take your cars, it's sometimes even more painful for you than going to jail. So you can anticipate that happening. With that, I'd like to introduce and welcome Sheriff Ed Gonzalez.
Thank you, District Attorney Ogg. Appreciate your leadership and for hosting us today. We stand shoulder to shoulder in our efforts to double down on our mission to keep racing, to keep racing on the tracks and off our streets. We're going to have additional deputies assigned to our traffic crimes unit specifically for the TX2K event that's coming up around spring break. We work very closely with our partners with the Houston Police Department, DPS, and others. This is really a strong collaboration. We work together every day to try to combat this very dangerous activity that's happening in our community, and it's not unique to Harris County. This is happening all over. We talked to colleagues all over, and this is a major issue. I really saw it really start creeping up a lot more right before or around the time of COVID, and it really hasn't let up. And it's a very dangerous type of situation that's happening over there. When you're talking about illegal street racing, just last year, just from our agency alone, we made over 400 arrests, 49 guns taken off the streets, 30 vehicles were seized, or the seizure procedure began, and 17 stolen vehicles were recovered, as well as narcotics in different situations as well. So I think it's important to note that it's more than just having fun or hanging out. This is very dangerous activity. We find a lot of other illicit criminal activity that is commonplace at many of these events. And so that's why we're taking it very seriously. I also want to recognize the members of my team that are here, Major Susan Carter, Lieutenant Chang, Sergeant Baldwin, that are here as well. They see and hear these stories all the time. Sergeant Baldwin was sharing with me that it's very common to hear from family members that are reporting that their loved one, their children, got injured even as a bystander at these events. It's not a rare thing to hear that. And that's the thing we want to send a message out is sometimes we'll hear, well, they're just kids, they're having fun. We did it when we were kids. It's a lot different now. And we want to just encourage them to find, locations where the community can legally participate in racing activities, such as the Houston Raceway Park, located at 2525 South FM 565 in Baytown. Those events are going to start Wednesday, March 15th to Sunday, March 19th. And also, just like I mentioned, some of the stolen vehicles and guns that were recovered, as well as narcotics, there's also a lot of impaired driving going on. There's also damage to property that happens as well. But back to the impaired driving as well. It's a very busy month for law enforcement here this month and for the district attorney's office. Keep in mind that we have rodeo season going on. It's going to be going on through spring break. We're going to have St. Patrick's Day coming up as well. We're also going to have these events, and like the DA stated, these events typically will spill over into illicit, illegal racing activity on our roadways where other people are put in harm's way. So don't do it. We're going to be looking out for you. We're going to be really mindful of some of these non-sanctioned races that are being discussed, where there's high stakes, high money that's put on these races, and we're not going to accept it. We're going to make sure that we're taking strict enforcement action, and we're going to use every tool that's available, working with the district attorney's office as well as other law enforcement partners to make sure that it doesn't happen here in Harris County. Do not come, because we know that a lot of people are going to come trying to be a part of this illegal activity. Do not do it. It's dangerous, it's criminal, and we're going to make sure that we put a stop to it. Briefly in Spanish, estamos aquí esta tarde con la Fiscalía Quemó, con su oficina, con muchos compañeros de diferentes agencias policíacas, para decir que estas carreras ilegales con coches en nuestras carreteras es muy peligroso. Sabemos que hay muchas carreras que van a estar pasando aquí durante la semana de Spring Break. Va a ser un mes muy ocupado con nosotros, con todos los eventos que están pasando en este mes, pero queremos decir que estas carreras ilegales son muy peligrosas. Vimos la situación que pasó en Austin. Nosotros también reportes donde personas que solamente ni están participando, solamente están ahí mirando. Muchas veces también han recibido heridas porque un carro pierde control. Hemos confiscado armas, hemos confiscado los carros, hemos encontrado carros robados. Entonces es muy peligroso que esta actividad que está pasando, y le vamos a poner alto, y por eso estamos aquí, para levantar la conciencia del peligro que existe con estas carreras de coches ilegales que pasan en nuestras carreteras. Entonces, también les decimos a los padres que pongan ojo a lo que están haciendo sus hijos, porque muchas veces son los mismos carros que los padres compran que los hijos están utilizando. Just a final warning or suggestion of parents, please pay close attention to your vehicles, and if you have these high-powered vehicles that you let your sons or daughters use, sometimes just pay attention to what they're doing. There are apps out there that allow you to monitor their speed and their whereabouts and things like that. That may be something for you to consider. But also be paying attention. Are the tires being worn out very quickly on these high-powered vehicles? Again, it's a shared responsibility for us to put a stop to this. Thank you, District Attorney.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Wyatt Martin. I'm an assistant chief with the Houston Police Department, and on behalf of Chief Finner, who was unfortunately unable to be here today, I want to thank the district attorney for allowing us to come here and participate and talk about this problem, because it is that. I'm going to echo a lot of what the sheriff just said. It's a problem. This is not kids going out on a lark, kids going out and having fun and just looking at cars, looking at cool cars and having a blast. They're committing serious criminal acts that place both the public, themselves, members of law enforcement in significant danger. It's not a new problem. It's been going on for a while, but we have seen an uptick in it, as what the sheriff mentioned indicated. So back in 2020, we actually got with the Harris County Sheriff's Department, the DA's office, DPS, and some other local law enforcement partners, and started the Traffic Crimes Task Force with the sole intent of addressing both the street takeover type incidents as well as illegal street racing. Because there is not a day goes by, it seems like, that you don't hear about a young person who is seriously hurt or even killed in one of these events. If you've seen any of the videos, if you've watched the news, you've seen them, there is very little concern for the spectator's safety, very little concern for their own safety, and no concern at all for law enforcement safety when we respond to these events. They quite often will flee just routinely from officers when they arrive, and they're fleeing in an extremely high-powered, sometimes overpowered vehicle that sometimes they can't control. And you end up with crashes involving innocent bystanders. You end up with crashes involving the participants where they are seriously hurt or killed, and we don't want any of that to happen to anyone. Just through the efforts of the task force alone, since 2020 when they started, they've made over 800 arrests regarding the street racing and street takeovers, and we're responsible for at least 60 of those seizures that the DA was talking about seizing these cars. She's absolutely correct when she says sometimes going to jail doesn't seem like a deterrent to some of the participants, but if they lose that expensive race car, that hits them in the wallet, it hits them where it hurts, and can at least deter their activity for some period of time. So that 800 and that 60, the 200 seizures that the DA talked about, that's a great start, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. If you saw the news from Austin the other day, this is not a local problem. It's a problem all over the state. It's a problem all over the country, and it's growing. So it's something that we have to be very diligent about and stay on top of. That being said, trying to track these incidents down is sometimes very difficult. They're planned through social media. They're planned through other types of apps where they can coordinate their information. And we spend a lot of time trying to track down where these events are occurring. One of the things I would ask for as a member of law enforcement is the public's assistance. A lot of the information we get comes from 911 calls. You know, you hear them on the back street in your neighborhood or somewhere nearby on a freeway in the middle of the night, just ripping and running at high rates of speed. You can hear them. Go outside and listen. If you live near a freeway, you will hear the street racing going on. If you get stuck in the backlog behind a takeover, please call 911. Please let us know what's going on. Crime Stoppers tips as well work. We do get a lot of Crime Stoppers tips on these about where they're going to be, when they're happening. In fact, if they're happening right now, people will call Crime Stoppers and let them know. So that type of information is crucial to our ability to continue to combat these issues. I'm going to close with a couple of safety tips real quick, though. If you happen to be out driving around and you get stuck in traffic and you realize what's going on ahead of you is that a bunch of people in high-powered cars have blocked off the street and they're doing donuts, they're shooting off fireworks, they're burning out their tires, creating a lot of smoke, I would urge you to exercise patience. Okay? You start honking, you start trying to get around it. These often turn into very aggressive situations where the participants will confront drivers, violently confront other drivers who they feel are trying to interfere with their activities. You've seen how they react to law enforcement. Don't expect that they would not do that to anyone else. So stay in your car, roll up the windows and lock the doors, call 911, let us know where it's happening, let us know what's going on. But we would urge you not to approach and try to intervene, not to get out of your car and get into a confrontation with the participants. Please let us know that this is happening so that we can respond. And to echo what the sheriff said about parents, please, it's not all young people. Some of these folks are older, they're out there with their own stuff, they're doing their own thing. But you have young people who are attracted to this. They've watched how many movies now? 10 movies about street racing at least. And they're attracted to it. It's exciting. It's something they want to go see. And they don't, at their age, sometimes understand the consequences. They don't see the consequences this could have to their life and their health and the lives and health of other people. So parents, whether it's apps, that you can use to track your kids' activity, how fast they're driving, where they're going with these cars. Whether it's not giving them access to these type of vehicles, or whether it's just knowing what your children are doing, knowing what they're doing on the weekends and who they're hanging out with, so that you can stay on top of it. Because the last thing you want is a visit from one of us coming to your door to tell you that your child is either in the hospital or, heaven forbid, in the morgue because they were participating in one of these events. So thank y'all. Thank you again for letting us be here.
Thank you, Chief.
Madam DA, thank you for the invite and your leadership on targeting this violent crime that's actually happening. And I call it violent crime because if you get smashed between two cars, that's pretty violent. So thank you for your leadership as it relates to trying to target this. We've been working the task force, as you've already heard several times up here with our local partners. But on February 23rd, the governor launched the statewide street takeover task force, which is and at that point, DPS immediately increased our efforts and our resources to target this task force. For us, this is a multiple-pronged approach with DPS criminal investigations, the Texas Highway Patrol, our criminal intelligence folks, as well as our aircraft. So we're throwing all of our resources into this to try to help minimize these street races that are happening. One of the things that we do know is that most of these groups are transients, right? They're not just local to Houston. They're just not local Houston folks. They're coming from all over. They're going all over. And if you watch the news, a lot of those that were in Austin and the event that happened in Austin were from Houston. So these are transient groups, and we have to take measures to try to get this situation under control. And so we've committed to our partners to continue that effort. Taking these vehicles is going to be a big deal for us. I think that's going to be the thing that's going to help make this see the other side. DPS special agents are working to determine links between identifying these street takeovers and organized criminal activity. Because as you heard the chief say, some of these are kids that are getting their cars from their parents, but a lot of these are adults who have a lot of other things going on. So if you come upon one of these events, it may not just be out having fun in the car doing donuts. It may be some other illegal activity there. And we know that that's happening. So our focus is to target some of those activities as well. Troopers continue to assist our local partners with these task forces. We're going to be assisting with the Texas 2K 2023. And as you've heard many times already, this cannot be understated, the dangers of these races that are happening. And the Texas DPS is committed to help try to minimize these races. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Before we bring up Ruben Perez, our Spanish-speaking representative and bureau chief here at the District Attorney's Office, I want to take a minute to underscore the catastrophic results, thank you, Sheriff, that we all see when these things go bad. And to that end, I want to recognize our Vehicular Crimes Division leader, Lynn Wynn, and the prosecutors who work for her, who go out at the same time the officers do, every time there's a fatality, especially those involving intoxication. It's a tough job, and they prosecute many of these same takeover and street racers, not for misdemeanor racing, but for homicide in all its iterations. And so this is a deadly activity. Don't do it. Law enforcement's ready. Prosecutors are ready. You'll not just go to court. We'll convict you. We'll take your car if you live. Ruben?
Thank you, Kim. Me llamo Rubén Pérez, como dijo la fiscal. Soy jefe de División de Crímenes Especiales. Trabajo por KMOG. Y el mensaje es muy simple. Como dijo el Sheriff González en español, no voy a repetir todo lo que dijo, pero le voy a decir esto. Estamos vigilando, estamos observando, y si andan allá haciendo carreras callejeras, vamos a detenerte, te vamos a procesar, te vamos a mandar a la cárcel. No nomás te vamos a mandar a la cárcel, te vamos a quitar tus carros, tus coches. porque esos coches y esos carros, usándolo como lo usan así, usándolo en las carreras ilegales, es muy peligroso para el público, para los que hay, los pasajeros. Puede haber gentes inocentes que van por una calle y de repente se hacen estas donas, estas carreras ilegales, y es muy peligroso para todo el público. Y quiero que sepan que, como dijo el policía, no queremos que el público esté lastimado, no queremos que los niños estén lastimados. Tenemos un caso en donde pusimos cargos a este hombre porque traba a su niño de 14 años en el coche de él. Andaba haciendo esto ilegalmente, y es muy peligroso no nomás para el conductor, pero para los pasajeros y para el público. El mensaje, otra vez, como les dijo el Sheriff González, no voy a repetir todo lo que dijo él, porque hay veces que parece que estos criminales, y sí son criminales, si andan aquí haciendo ese peligro, son criminales y lo vamos a tratar como criminales. Parece que esos criminales le dan más valor a sus coches, a sus carros, que a sus familiares y al público. Es muy peligroso. El mensaje, otra vez, el mensaje es muy simple. Te vamos a detener, te vamos a poner cargos, te vamos a quitar tus coches, y estamos vigilando, estamos observando, y si pescamos, cuídense, porque estamos aquí para castigarlos. Gracias.
Thank you all. That concludes our presentation. We're available for questions, and we have many experts in the room in law enforcement and prosecution who can give specific examples and answers.
Will you guys be doing any undercover stings like this, targeting these races?
Well, let me let law enforcement respond to that. Sheriff, Chief.
We'll use any tool at our disposal on these. We don't talk specifically about operations, but we have had undercover operations in the past. It is very difficult to get in with these groups. They're very secretive. They are very careful about who they talk to. But that's one of the reasons I emphasize that we need the public's assistance if you see these things happening, or if you get caught behind one of them. We really need to know, because sometimes it is very difficult to find the final location. They will bounce around all over the city before they finally decide where to be. So we'll use every tool at our disposal to try and combat these.
Chief, just real quick before, just a separate thing. I did want to also make a point or a caveat that there's also some legitimate car clubs out there that we do support, and we do encourage people to come together. There's a beauty in seeing some of these cars, and they do that. They come together, they have meetups. It's all good, and sometimes they're forgotten because we're so much focused on the criminal or the dangerousness of this type of activity. But we do encourage the others that are out there, and they like to show their cars and come together and network, and I think that's a positive thing.
Question for the sheriff and for the chief as well.
I think she had a question real quick. Sorry.
You talked about how this has been an ongoing issue. We've been talking to residents who say that they've been asking for something like this for a while. They feel like there hasn't been urgency around it. So why is now the right time for this?
I'll let the chief also speak, but I feel there has been a sense of urgency. We were advertising our tip line where people could reach out to us directly. We formed a traffic crimes unit specifically to address this. We solicited tips from the community. One of the challenges is that it's very difficult. These meetups sometimes can develop within 2 minutes on social media, so it's very hard to kind of anticipate maybe where they're going to be at, and that's by their design. They don't kind of say, we're going to be here next week, but we're all putting efforts. We work very closely with HPD on this, so we prioritize a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of other parties when we're dealing on the wide spectrum of criminal activity that happens in a county and region as big as ours, but we have focused on it, but we want to do more. We recognize that we want to do more. I remember a few years we were, I think, at HPD headquarters announcing, again, to try to reduce dangerous driving in our community. Not only this, but road rage and other things. We've developed a very dangerous driving culture in our community, this included, and we have to change that. So it's a multi-pronged approach. But look, we could always use more resources to tackle these type of crimes.
Yeah, to the sheriff's point, it is something that we've been taking seriously for a long time, but it does happen all over the city. We started the Traffic Crimes Task Force, which was specifically to address these types of issues back in 2020, November of 2020. And we've been working closely with the DA, the sheriffs ever since, to try and prosecute these offenders as vigorously as we possibly can. But the city of Houston is 600 plus square miles in a county, Harris County, that's 1,700. So these happen all across the city, all different locations. It's not like this is something that's localized to one part of town where we can really focus on. They will pop up anywhere. So I can't emphasize enough, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Any information that people have about these in the community, they can do it anonymously through Crime Stoppers. They can call us anonymously if they see something going on. But that information is invaluable to us because we pull out all the stops trying to find these, trying to pick up when they're going to happen. Like the sheriff said, they can pop up in the course of several minutes on social media, and they're planned and they're ready to go. So information intelligence is important, but we've been working this through the task force since 2020, and we were aware of it before then. It's just it became such a big issue and such a hot button issue at that time that we felt formalizing that relationship was quite important.
We have questions for law enforcement, including the state. Granted, you indicate that they happen anywhere, and they have happened everywhere. You've reported on this for quite some time, and my colleague Joel has. Question is, are any of these locations repeat locations, like an abandoned shopping center, which we know that they tend to have that? Separately, is there one particular section of the city or the area as a whole that tends to see these acts more frequently, like than say another? For example, the southwest side, the southeast side, the north side. Can you talk to that, please?
I mean, looking at the map of where these happen, they happen anywhere. But you're going to see them in areas where there's large expanses of either wide open roadways or large parking lots, things of that nature. As far as specific locations where they've had repeat offenses, I don't have that in front of me. I will tell you this, quite often it's the property owner that's coming to us saying, they're destroying my property. They're ripping up my parking lot, they're damaging my buildings, they're leaving behind massive amounts of trash and debris, running into buildings, causing significant property damage. It gets into what the sheriff talked about with legitimate car clubs, having difficulty finding people who will allow them to have an event on their property because they associate them with this type of illegal activity. So they do happen in all sectors of the city, but they're always focused, seems like, in areas, other than the street takeovers themselves, they're focused in areas where there's large slabs of concrete that they can get on and gather hundreds of cars at a time to get out there and engage in this type of behavior.
For unincorporated Harris County, and I think it sometimes is very similar with the city, we've seen, and this is anecdotally, mainly West Harris County towards Katy, northwest towards the greater Cypress area north. Those are the main areas, the main corridors, all the way through East Tex Freeway, parking lots as well as different streets. We hear it quite a bit, and so that's kind of for unincorporated Harris County where we see it the most.
I'm going to say this. Voy a decir esto en español. Es un mensaje que damos cada vez que podemos. Si eres una persona que estás aquí ilegalmente o llegaste aquí ilegalmente y observas, miras, vigilarlos, algo que está haciendo como las carreras ilegales, repórtenlos. No te vamos a deportar, no te vamos a reportar a inmigración. Puedes llamar en anonimato, pero como no tienes que decir tu nombre, pero repórtenlos. No tengan miedo que los vamos a deportar o que vamos a denunciarlos, ¿ok?
And a lot of these takeovers and races and all that, they really want the wow factor. Social media is a big part of this culture. You see a lot of TV shows, a lot of things on YouTube, so the more bigger and bolder and faster that it is, that's what they want. Some even advertise their social media handles and other things. It's very lucrative for them. It's big money. There's even betting on all this stuff that happens. So just want the public to understand how big this really is. It's more than just, again, kids gathering somewhere. And that's what we're trying to drive, is the context of it.
I think it's already been said, but many of the most of what we run into as far as the races actually happen on the freeways, the bigger roads, right? Your 99s, your beltways, your I-10s, especially when the traffic's not as heavy. That's where we run into most of the races, where we catch most of our racers. But as far as the events themselves, they could happen all over. We don't have any specific intel right now on where the majority are, but they pop up all over. Every night there's something happening somewhere in the city or in the county as it relates to these races. I was talking to my counterpart on the way down here in Dallas. They have an actual event where the owner actually has a large slab of property where these people come in from all over the country for legitimate racing, for legitimate doing their donuts and all that stuff. But the problem comes in is once they leave the event, then these kids or these folks actually leave and go onto the streets and still do the illegal stuff, right? So Those are some of the issues we're dealing with. But again, it's not just a Harris County or Houston. It's a statewide, nationwide event that's a problem that's happening.
And Kim, what more can be done? I know obviously the state launched its task force, but what more can be done with regards to this in terms of resources being provided?
People are frustrated with illegal driving during work hours, late at night. You can hear it on every freeway in Harris County, and law enforcement is working just as fast as we can. We all need more resources. You know, with approximately 340 prosecutors to prosecute not just these traffic cases, the deaths that are caused by them, and all the violent crime that's happening in Houston, it's just not sufficient. So we continue to urge our leadership for more prosecutors, getting them early so we can train them up. These are really serious cases. I can't imagine the parents out there who've lost a child not coming together to encourage the rest of Houston to report these people. Report them when you see them. Just a week and a half ago, a state legislator told me she got blocked behind a motorcycle group, and they were literally flagging them 2 by 2 to race, and the motorists were held up for about half an hour. Be careful if you're filming them. Don't be overt. Do not challenge them. Just as law enforcement has said, these are not all kids. Many of them are crooks. But what can be done if you're a parent? You know, really consider your judgment in buying a high-performing, expensive car for a young person. Consider who they're talking to and hanging out. And with the money and the social media fame that goes along with this type of crime, you're really letting your kids expose themselves to much more than they realize. So I'm going to appeal to the parents in Harris County. Know what your kids are doing. Don't let them drive these high-powered cars that you provide. We're going to take them. And worse yet, you know, we may not be gathered for a court case. It may be a funeral. I want to thank everybody for coming. Welcome. We'll see you again soon. I want to thank our partners in law enforcement and wish our task force good luck and Godspeed.